They told you to be kind, to be soft, to be patient. They said, good people get good things. Kindness will come back to you. But in the real world, it rarely does. Because kindness without power doesn't look noble, it looks vulnerable. People don't admire the one who never says no. They take advantage of them. The overly generous man becomes a wallet. The soft-spoken worker becomes invisible. The agreeable woman becomes a doormat, and the worst part, you think you're doing the right thing, but slowly, you start to disappear. You start to feel empty, used, unseen. Centuries ago, Machiavelli warned us, a prince must learn how not to be good when being good threatens his survival. He understood what most people today still don't. That unguarded kindness isn't leadership, it's surrender. You live in a world that rewards appearance, not intention. A world that praises kindness, but only respects it when it comes from someone powerful enough to be cruel, but chooses not to be. And if you're being kind, because you're afraid to be disliked, afraid to walk away, afraid to be alone, that's not kindness, that's fear. Wearing a smile. In this video, I'll break down why kindness without power gets you ignored, used, and replaced. We'll explore Machiavelli's real message, the psychology of people-pleasing, and how to turn kindness into strength, not sacrifice. Machiavelli. The name itself sounds cold, scheming, ruthless. But here's what most people get wrong. He wasn't promoting cruelty. He was exposing reality. He lived in a world of shifting alliances, assassinations, betrayals. Empires rose and fell, not by kindness, but by strategy. And he saw good men, noble men, destroyed because they believed everyone else played fair. They didn't. That's why he wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." It wasn't a celebration of fear, it was a survival manual. Because love without power is fragile, and kindness without leverage is disposable. You can give your heart to the world, but if you have no spine behind it, they'll throw it back broken. Machiavelli didn't hate compassion. He simply understood this. Kindness must be a choice, not your only option. Because if you're only kind because you can't afford not to be, that's not kindness, that's helplessness. The world doesn't respect someone who has no choice but to be nice. It respects someone who can say no, but chooses to say yes, on their terms. In Machiavelli's world, and ours, goodness means nothing if no one fears crossing you. Let's drop the illusion. Most people aren't kind because they're strong. They're kind because they're scared. Scared to offend. Scared to be judged. Scared to be alone. So they smile when they're uncomfortable. They say yes when everything in them screams no. They fold just to avoid conflict. This isn't kindness. This is fear dressed up as virtue. Psychologists call it the fawn response, a trauma pattern, a survival instinct. You try to earn safety by pleasing others, by becoming small, by being liked. But here's the paradox. The more you chase approval, the less of it you get. People don't respect someone who can't draw the line. They don't value someone who's always available. You think you're being nice. They just see someone they can use. And every time you stay silent, every time you let them cross the line, you teach them that your boundaries don't matter, that you don't matter. This is what happens when kindness has no power behind it. You lose your voice, your edge, your identity. You become invisible, even to yourself. In a world that rewards clarity and strength, Being agreeable isn't just dangerous, it's self-erasure. What if kindness wasn't about being soft? What if real kindness was about being in control? There's a version of kindness that isn't rooted in fear, but in power, not desperation, but discipline. This is strategic kindness, the kind that doesn't beg for approval, the kind that doesn't bend to avoid conflict. It doesn't need to be liked because it's grounded in self-respect. This version of you can say no and still choose to say yes. It doesn't chase validation, it chooses connection, and it walks away when respect isn't mutual. This is what Machiavelli admired: a ruler with compassion, but only after they earned power; a lion with the mind of a fox. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're clarity. They're self-protection without apology. Strategic kindness doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're not controllable. You're not being kind because you're afraid of losing someone. You're being kind because you don't need to lose yourself to keep them. And in that is quiet dominance. These ideas aren't just theory. History has already tested them. And the truth, kindness alone doesn't win. Kindness backed by strength does. Let's talk about Nelson Mandela. He forgave, but not from weakness. He forgave after 27 years in prison, after fighting a system that tried to break him. When he walked out, he didn't bow. He stood tall and offered peace from power. That's why the world listened. That's why his kindness mattered. Because it wasn't demanded, it was chosen. Now, look at Abraham Lincoln. Soft-spoken, gentle, but never afraid of hard decisions. He led a nation through a civil war. He made enemies. He carried the weight of a country on his back. And still, he showed compassion. But don't confuse that with being nice. He wasn't trying to be liked. He was trying to do what was right. And that's what earned him respect, not compliance. Now contrast that with Neville Chamberlain, a man who tried to make peace with Hitler. Through kindness, through appeasement. He brought back a treaty and promised peace, but he had no power to enforce it. The result? Disaster. Because when kindness isn't backed by consequence, it becomes permission. Even in everyday life, the nice one at work gets buried in everyone else's tasks. The always available friend becomes the one no one values. The partner who avoids conflict becomes the one silently suffering. Why? Because when you don't protect your kindness with strength, people stop seeing it as a gift. They see it as an expectation, as obligation, as weakness. We don't admire people because they were kind. We admire them because they were powerful and still chose to be kind. So what now? Should you stop being kind? Number. But you should stop being kind. By default, because when kindness isn't backed by strength, it becomes a sacrifice, a surrender, an open wound that never heals. Machiavelli wasn't against kindness. He was against weakness. He believed that kindness only matters when it's a choice, not a coping mechanism. True kindness is calm. It's deliberate. It's never afraid to walk away. You don't need to be cruel, but you do need to be dangerous, not violent, not reckless, just capable. Capable of saying no, of holding your ground, of not needing to be liked, just respected. Because the most powerful person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who could destroy everything, but chooses to build instead. That's what Machiavelli saw. That's what the world still needs to learn. So be kind, but let it come from your spine, not your fear, from your fire, not your fragility. Kindness is beautiful. But when it's backed by power, it becomes unbreakable.